The night she arrived, the rain fell like it was trying to wash guilt out of the streets, and I remember thinking that some storms don't come from the sky. They come to settle old accounts. The doorbell rang once, sharp and uncertain, and when I opened the door, there she stood with soaked hair clinging to her face, eyes heavy with a responsibility that did not belong to her. In that moment, before she even spoke, I felt the weight of a past I had tried to bury rise up and demand to be acknowledged. Before we go any further, pause with me for just a second. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of compassion that changes lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, The Kindness Chronicles. Stories like this exist because people like you still believe goodness matters. Years earlier, my father had been a man who trusted too easily and gave too much to the wrong people. His generosity was not loud or proud. It was clumsy and hopeful, the kind that believed doing the right thing would always come back around. When he lent money to her father during a desperate time, it was not a contract that bound them but a handshake and a shared belief that dignity was worth protecting. Life, however, had other plans. Illness took my father slowly, draining not only his strength but our savings as well, and when he passed, the debt remained unpaid, a silent shadow in our home that reminded me of promises unfinished. I carried that bitterness quietly, convincing myself that survival required hardness, that compassion was a luxury for those who could afford disappointment. She told me why she was there without dramatics or excuses. Her father was gone too, taken suddenly by a stroke that left their family with nothing but apologies and unpaid obligations. She had sold what little she owned, taken jobs that bruised her hands and pride, and traveled hours just to stand on my doorstep. She did not come asking for mercy. She came carrying responsibility like a burden she refused to set down. As she spoke, I noticed how her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. This was not a woman looking for escape. This was someone trying to stand upright in a world that kept pushing her down. I surprised both of us when I told her she could stay. The words left my mouth before my defenses could stop them, shaped by something deeper than logic. The house had been empty since my father's death, filled with echoes that made nights unbearable. Offering her a place to stay felt reckless and strangely right, as if the house itself had been waiting for someone who could breathe life back into its walls. She hesitated, pride fighting gratitude, but exhaustion eventually won. That night, as she slept in the spare room, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the rain fade and wondering whether kindness was about to cost me more than I could afford. Living together was not easy. The debt hung between us like a third presence, silent but always felt. She woke before sunrise every day, working multiple jobs and refusing comfort, as if rest itself were a form of betrayal. I struggled with resentment, catching myself calculating how long it would take before the debt was repaid, how quickly I could return to my carefully controlled solitude. Yet small moments began to chip away at that armor. She cleaned the house not out of obligation but respect, cooked meals that reminded me of family, and treated my father's memory with a reverence that startled me. In her quiet routines, I saw not obligation but honor, and it unsettled everything I thought I knew about strength. The real challenge came when life tested us again, as it always does when things begin to soften. I lost my job during a sudden round of layoffs, and panic crept back into my chest like an old enemy. Pride urged me to hide the truth, but she noticed the change in my silence, the way I lingered too long over unpaid bills. Without asking, she increased her hours, came home later, and placed part of her earnings on the table each week, not as payment, but as partnership. Watching her shoulder a burden that was never hers broke something open inside me. I realized then that debt was not just about money. It was about how fear can be repaid with trust, and how loss can be answered with presence. As months passed, the house transformed. Laughter returned softly at first, then more freely. We shared stories of our fathers, discovering similarities in their quiet kindness and flawed courage. In honoring their mistakes, we learned how deeply they had loved. The debt shrank on paper, but something larger grew between us, an understanding that we were both survivors of promises made with good intentions and broken by fate. I stopped seeing her as someone who owed me, and began seeing her as someone who chose to stay, even when leaving would have been easier. The day the debt was finally repaid should have felt like closure, but instead it felt like the beginning of a terrifying question. She stood there with the final amount, eyes steady but uncertain, ready to walk away because responsibility told her it was time. I looked around the house, at the walls that no longer echoed, at the quiet warmth that had replaced grief, and I understood that kindness, once given, demands courage to continue. Asking her to stay was no longer about repayment or charity. It was about choosing connection over isolation, hope over fear. When she agreed, tears filled her eyes not because she was relieved, but because she felt chosen. Years later, I often think about how close I came to closing the door that night. How easily bitterness could have won. Instead, two people burdened by debts they did not create found freedom in shared compassion. We learned that kindness does not erase pain, but it transforms it into something that can be carried together. Our fathers' unfinished promises did not divide us. They brought us to the same threshold, asking whether we would repeat the cycle of loss or rewrite it with grace. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is open the door instead of closing it, please take a moment now to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to believe that goodness still exists in quiet, ordinary choices. And before you go, I have a special request. Please comment this line below if this story moved you even a little. Kindness is never a loss. Your words may become the encouragement someone else needs tonight.